RDS recently published a list of their top 10 Montreal Canadiens prospects, so I wanted to review their picks, give my opinions on these prospects and see where they could line up, and just kind of take this as an opportunity to shine the spotlight on a lot of these Canadiens young guys for the future. We've got 10 names to go, 10 minutes of gameplay here. I know you always love seeing these types of videos. Don't be afraid to show your support with either a comment or a super thanks if you feel very generous. So let's kick off with number 10. The Montreal Canadiens' 10th best prospect is, according to RDS, Riley Kidney. Now, we've talked about Kidney a ton over the past few weeks. He's been signed recently by the Canadiens, and he is a guy who, in the QMJHL this season, exploded with 100 total points in 66 games played. Not bad for a second-round selection that's only 5'11", 168. He can whiz around the offensive zone, he dangles, he kicks the puck to himself. He's got a really interesting skill set that allows him to create offense, and it served him really well this season, getting 70 assists in the process. I know some scouts that actually like him a little bit more than Josh Waugh because of the projectable qualities of his game, but Kidney on RDS's list is only at 10th overall. The 9th best prospect, according to RDS in the Canadian system, is Jan Mysak, the long-lost brother of Lish Mysak, who actually doesn't really exist. Jan Mysak was a guy that a lot of people thought at the beginning of the 2019-20 season could actually be a top 15, top 20 pick. This was because in earlier years he was already playing for the Pro Czechia League for Hockey Club Litvinov. However, his draft season was seen as somewhat of a disappointment. He made his way over to the OHL and he was a point per game with Hamilton, but he did not show off the projectable skills that really solidified him as a top pick, like some people thought he would have been based off of his play in Czechia. He fell to the second round where the Montreal Canadiens selected him 48th overall, and 2 years later, he is back in his second stint with Hamilton after spending a year with Litvinov again and the Laval Rocket. He had 64 points in 61 games played this recent Bulldogs year. The 8th best prospect that RDS has for the Montreal Canadiens is indeed Josh Waugh, the one that everybody's been talking about. This is the number one most underrated prospect in a lot of people's eyes, based off of how he was drafted and how he's played since then. He was drafted in the 5th round, 150th overall, and he recently put up 119 points in 66 games as an 18-year-old in the QMJHL. Absolutely phenomenal numbers. However, some will go out there and question his engagement level, his pace of play, and the offensive talent projectability as to whether or not he could become an NHL star, but those are all questions we're going to have to answer later. For now, in the QMJHL, Josh Waugh is an absolute stud, and we're going to be hoping to see him improve on that stock next season, if not in the next few years in the AHL and potentially Montreal itself. The 7th best prospect in the Montreal Canadiens system is Jesse Ylonen, playing for the Laval Rocket. He's a guy that was drafted back in 2018 in the second round, so it's been a while for Ylonen to actually be a prospect. He had some pretty good years for the Liga with the Lathi Pelicans, where he was a 20-point scorer in 50 games played. However, in 2021-2022, Ylonen split his time with the Montreal Canadiens and the Laval Rocket. The 6-foot right-handed forward had himself a pretty good showcase in Laval, getting 36 points in 52 games played, and he showed off pretty alright in the Montreal Canadiens sample he had as well, getting 5 points in 14 games in the process. Ylonen is still only 22 years old, so there's still a whole bunch of time, I feel, for this guy to eventually become an NHL-AHL tweener, maybe an NHL bottom six guy who can play in a more versatile role. But at the end of the day, he is ranked as the 7th best guy in the Montreal Canadiens system. RDS is sticking with Laval, though, for the 6th best Montreal Canadiens prospect, as they talk about left-handed defenseman Matthias Norlander. He was drafted in 2019, and we've been talking about Norlander for a long time. He started the season off with the Montreal Canadiens. He wasn't great. He got sent back over to Frölunda, and he ended off his season in Laval with 2 points in 6 games played. There's no doubt that there still is a whole bunch of potential for Matthias Norlander heading into the next few years, as he's only 22 years old. You also have to remember all the stuff that the Modo Hockey Club people were talking about with this guy, how his skating ability, his offensive lethality, they were all really good aspects to his game. And so for the Montreal Canadiens, even though you saw him start up his career in November and not really play the best, there still is a whole bunch more time to improve, hopefully under a better coaching staff as well, because you gotta remember it was Dominique Ducharme who was doing all that stuff. The fifth best prospect the Montreal Canadiens have, according to RDS, is Sean Farrell. He is an absolute stick of dynamite out there. 5'9", 174 pounds, but incredibly skilled. He had 101 points in 53 games in the Chicago Steel system last year. This season, though, playing for Harvard, he was over a point per game in the NCAA. He also was over a point per game for Team USA at the Olympic Games, and he was under a point per game at the World Championships. Sean Farrell, despite being only 5'9" and 20 years old, is an absolute game changer of a prospect that the Canadiens should be feeling lucky to have drafted in the 4th round of 2020. We've been talking about Farrell for a long time now, so the fact that we're even still bringing his name up in this kind of conversation makes me very happy, because it shows that the progression and all the hype seems to have been, in some respects, slightly worth it. The 4th best prospect the Montreal Canadiens have, according to RDS, is Logan Mayu. Now, I've made my entire sentiment known over the past year and a bit how I view Logan Mayu. I still personally don't feel too comfortable talking about him in a way that ignores what he has done in the past, but of course, this still is a prospect the Canadiens do have, and we still have to talk about the hockey player that is there. I still do have some concerns, though, because even going back to the 2021 NHL Draft, I didn't really think of Logan Mayu as a potential first-round talent in the first place. I mean, there were reportedly some scouts that saw him as a top 20 pick based off of his skating and mobility, but I personally just didn't really see it. Plus the fact that I felt like there were so many other players that you could have gotten at 31st overall that would have had a better impact long-term than Logan Mayu. The one that I was thinking about personally was Logan Stankoven, who literally shares the same first name, so if you watch the video of Mayu actually getting drafted, I was super excited when he said Logan, and I was like, whoa, they're taking Stankoven, yes, but then they didn't, and they took the guy that said he didn't want to be drafted and that a lot of people were going out there with a very polarizing opinion about. At the end of the day, though, Mayu is indeed a right-handed defenseman. He had 9 points in 12 games this season for London, so for the sake of the Montreal Canadiens, hopefully his maturity level on and off the ice improves over the next few years. The 3rd best prospect for the Montreal Canadiens is one that's actually already on the team. Jordan Harris, recently coming out of the Northeastern University Huskies program. He had 20 points in 39 games played as a senior for the team, and he had 1 goal in the 10-game sample he had for Montreal. He displayed a pretty mature and calm game in the limited sample he had in the Bell Center, and it was really nice to see just the tools and the smart decision-making that Harris brought to the game. Especially considering how bad the Montreal Canadiens were to end off the year, Jordan Harris and his sustainable play was one of the better parts of that closing segment. Does he have the highest ceiling in the world? I wouldn't necessarily say so, but I still do like the fact that he is here, he's doing his thing, and he's looking very comfortable in the role that he has been given. The 2nd best prospect the Canadiens have is another right-handed defenseman. It is Justin Barron, who was initially a Colorado Avalanche prospect, but who was traded over to Montreal in the Artturi Lehkonen trade. He has himself 2 points in the 5 games he had for the Montreal Canadiens this season, and he had 20 points in 43 games for the Colorado Eagles in his first full season of AHL pro play. Justin Barron is a guy that I absolutely love. He walks the line like nobody's business. He's got some really good offensive tools. He can skate as well. And over the next few years, it's going to be really awesome seeing Barron alongside of whoever it is Marty St. Louis decides to play him beside. Maybe that's a Romanov for the shutdown game. Maybe it's a Norlander long-term, because they can both move and they can both create offense. I really do like the versatility that Barron has, and he was a first-round pick for a reason. So the fact that Artturi Lehkonen was the guy that got traded over for this player, I think it's a really good win of a trade for the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, Lehkonen is doing his thing for the Avalanche in the postseason right now, so I don't think they're really complaining, but still, long-term, I really like this move for Montreal. And the first top prospect the Montreal Canadiens have, according to RDS, is none other than Kaiden Guhle, who is playing in the Edmonton Oil Kings system right now in the WHL playoffs. He's got 9 points in 8 games at the time of recording this audio, and 25 points in 25 games for the team in general. He is just an absolute wall out there, who is really good at shutting down the play, and who's really defined his offensive game this season as well. There were some concerns about the projectability of safety that Guhle had heading into the NHL Draft in 2020, but he's really worked on his defensive game, making sure those finer details are a lot more sufficient and consistent, and the player that we're looking at this season is a lot different than the guy that was suiting up for the Prince Albert Raiders back in 2019-20. He had a limited sample with the Laval Rocket as well in 2020-2021, which I think certainly would have helped him mature heading back to the WHL, but either way, Caden Gooley is the top prospect in the Canadian system, a guy that I think could max out as a top 4, maybe even a top 3 player who logs up big minutes and who just makes life a living hell for the opposition in the Montreal zone. Talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about these 10 prospects and how RDS has ranked them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.